Welcome everyone to the Leadership Insights series interview with Tony Lendrum, who is the founder of 0 to 10 Relationship Management and the author of the new book, Building High Performance Business Relationships. I'm Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter, and I will be your host throughout this interview. A little bit about Organisations That Matter. We exist fundamentally to work with and serve senior and developing leaders who share our view that organisational success is built upon the foundation and the belief that humans actually matter, and that organisational success comes from enabling people to be the best that they can be. In that context, that's one of the reasons why I am licensed to be able to provide Tony's 0 to 10 relationship management material as an ETF P2, which we'll explain a little bit later on what that actually means. Here's a quick sample of a number of the range of organisations that we work with through Organisations That Matter, just to show that we work across a whole range of organisations, because that principle of enabling people to be the best they can be, which provides organisational success, really doesn't matter what industry you're in, that principle seems to hold true. Throughout this interview, please take notes as you go through, so I encourage you to take notes so that you can follow the conversation, and that also will help you to be able to ask questions. You will see in your little panel, which is in the top right-hand corner of your screen, that you have the opportunity to raise your hand. So if you would like to do that, then you have this opportunity to raise your hand, or you can just simply type in your question and press send. I will do my best to create opportunities for people to ask questions as we go. At the same time, for time management purposes, there may be reasons for me to just hold on to your question until we go to the open mic section at the end. We are recording this interview, so those of you that do choose to use the microphones to ask your questions, please be aware that that's what we're doing. We have got the microphones open, but we will be recording it, and I will be sending you a link to that recording. When you see this symbol, that's when we will definitely be going to the open mic section, which I'm hoping will be somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes at the end, towards the end of the interview. So if you are happy to hold on to your questions to then, that's great. If you'd like to ask them along the way, please feel free to raise your hand. Again, though, I might just hold on to some of the questions because I am aware of where this interview is going to flow, and I might be clear that we might be going to answer your questions as we go. Now, we'd like to focus on the person that we're talking with, which is Tony Lendrum, who's for over 30 years has been focusing on relationship management. And 30 years is a long time. It's certainly not a short time. And he just keeps getting more and more clear about the value of relationship management over that 30-year period. And Tony, I noticed that in your first book, one of the things that you write right in the front page was your vision, which was about making the world a better place. And I'm interested for you to share with us all, please, what attracted you to relationship management in the first place?
Yeah, good morning, Gary. Look, relationship management is fundamentally about relationships, obviously, and in the business context, better relationships make for better business, but I think there's a broader context here in terms of the society we live in and the communities that we engage. And for me, relationships are an essential part of life. It's the way we live, as well as do business. So hence, making the world a better place, it seems to me to be a reasonable place to start is around relationships.
And it would seem, Tony, that even though your focus is quite clearly about business relationships, that there is a spin-off effect into relationships of any type. Is that your experience?
Well, absolutely. I mean, relationships in business, we don't just do business, of course. We have relationships in our personal lives. We have our own individual personal development aspirations. All of that in some way involves relationships. So in terms of the models, the tools, the principles, the applications that we'll briefly touch on this morning, that they're as applicable in our personal lives and our families as they are in the business context.
Which leads us to, you first published the Strategic Partnering Handbook back in 1995, which is now into its 4th edition and has also been published in Chinese, Mandarin, if I understand correctly. And that book was 474 pages in length. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey in publishing your first book back in 1995?
Well, yes, a good question. In essence, a labour of love. It's the monster, if you like, the 470-page or so book around strategic partnering specifically, and it really was meant to be a deep dive within a very specific space around partnerships and alliances. And within that context, the 0 to 10 framework, it was initiated, and it's evolved from there. So it really comes out of my love of collaboration, my experiences around partnerships and alliances, which also, frankly, were born out of a whole range of other different relationship approaches and types and the like.
And for those folk listening in that really love detail, one of the great benefits of this book is Tony really did dive in deep, as he has quickly and briefly explained, and the amount of detail in this book is absolutely extraordinary. And I encourage any of you that really have a passion for detail and really want to get to the depths of 0 to 10 relationship management to really consider getting this handbook and having it part of your personal library. On the flip side, though, you then published in 2004 for the first time the Strategic Partnering Pocketbook. Could you tell us a little bit about that book, because it's only 102 pages long?
Well, indeed, looking as simple as Big Brother, Little Brother, and whereas the big book, the handbook, is the deep dive into a really, as you say, quite a level of detail. The pocketbook is deliberately meant to be read from one city to another and return on a short flight, and it gives overviews with pictures, checklists and the like. So again, within the strategic partnering, alliancing, partner segment type of framework, it's a very helpful small text to give people a flavour for what collaboration is all about and the benefits it can bring.
And certainly one of the advantages with the pocketbook is it's filled with lots of illustrations, and there's also some tools that people can practically use in terms of assessing some relationships within the pocketbook itself. And one of the other benefits I've found is the pocketbook can be used as a conversation starter. Literally, people could provide it to other folk within the business and very quickly get a high level, but at the same time quite a deep level understanding of how relationship management works, and use the book itself as a conversation starter. Is that anything like your experience with the pocketbook?
Yeah, look, absolutely. It's meant to be literally that thumbnail sketch through what can be really quite a complex topic. And again, I must acknowledge here the work of Jock McNeish, the illustrator, the cartoonist, the visionary, if you like, who helped me put many thousands of words into some just fantastic pictures. So in particular in the pocketbook, as with the new book, Building High Performance Relationships, Business Relationships, the Jock's pictures are used extensively, and they just really add value to the messages generally in the book.
And for those folks online, we're getting to see lots of Jock's illustrations. In fact, most of what you'll see on the screen will be from Jock's illustrations, so you get to see them live as we go through. And that leads us to your third book, Building High Performance Business Relationships, which I suppose fills the gap between the other two books. Do you want to just give us a little brief understanding of why you went to this third book?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas originally the purpose and my passion was around partnerships and alliances, and the original 0 to 10 framework, as I think I mentioned a little earlier, was a framework around which we could take that deep dive into partnerships and alliances. What turns out to be really important here is that the whole spectrum of relationships, it needs to be understood, and the competencies need to be developed in managing those relationships, from far left, combative and tribal and trading and transact, through to the higher end partnering relationships and pioneering and community-based relationships and all those in between. So this book really provides a much broader understanding of the entire 0 to 10 spectrum, and also within that the various themes around components and people and change aspects, and the whole concept of journey management, not just around partnerships and alliances, but in fact all of the relationship approaches on the 0 to 10 scale that in my view are entirely legitimate, depending on the time, the strategies, the context, and the general sort of broad environment in which you're working in. So for me it was a logical extension of the original focus on partnerships and alliances, and extending that to a much broader spectrum, both in terms of relationship approach, but also looking down at the performance scale as well.
And for those folk that are interested in the detail, we're giving you the page numbers for the other two books. This one's 282 pages long. Now, Tony, you talked about journey management there, and one of the factors that you introduced for the first time is this idea of the storyboard, the 0 to 10 relationship management storyboard. Would you mind just giving us a brief overview, because we will be going into some more detail over the journey of this interview, but would you mind giving us, please, a brief overview of the relationship management storyboard?
Yeah, look, over the years, certainly the last 5 years or so, it's become clear to me that the way people learn and the way people absorb information is around stories. I love to tell stories about my own experiences, and other folks obviously like to do the same. So the way we learn, the way we gain experiences and knowledge and insight, there's no better way for me than to tell stories. So it was a logical extension here of the original models and tools, particularly around partnering and alliancing, to extend that into a storyboard context, which is, as you can see from the screen there, is made up of 6 principles and sort of 5 broad themes around framework and components, section A, people and change in the middle, section B, and of course journey management, section C. So it was, if you like, a strategy on a page around relationship management that has a logical sequence, but that could also be used literally as a storyboard, that people can engage their own experiences and insights directly by using this storyboard, again made up of principles and sort of broad themes around which the details can then be explored through application of tools and models and the like.
Which is, again, folk, when they're on this relationship management journey, could literally use this storyboard as a conversation starter, again, about talking through where are we at with our particular relationship and the journey that we're on. Again, using the sections A, B and C to help you guide through that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the concept you raised around journey management is critical here. You know, relationships are about managing a journey. They're not an event, they're a process. And they happen over time, not overnight. So for me, it's been a key learning over the last 20 years or so that relationships, like marriages, need to be worked on, need to be treated as a life journey, if you like. In particular, the high impact relationships that most organisations have.
Now, I did promise in the introduction to this interview, and in fact in the invitation, that we would quickly explain the storyboard and we would get into the 6 principles and 5 themes. So we've briefly talked about the storyboard, so it's time to sort of get in and give the opportunity for you to explain each of the parts of the storyboard, Tony. So the first place we'll go is to actually talk about principle 1, which states that you can't be all things to all people. What does that actually mean?
Exactly as it says, I guess, and the picture really supports, Strock's picture really supports the principal statement up top. And in saying you can't be all things to all people, of course, what that infers that you need to be the right things to the right people. Very few organisations can go it alone these days. In fact, I've yet to meet one. So we rely heavily on the support and guidance of not only our own employees, but in fact of suppliers, other key stakeholders and the like, and in delivering products and services downstream to clients and customers. You just fundamentally need the support of other parties, and that in essence is what that principle means. Politicians probably are the most visible group that try and be all things to all people, and they've learnt over the years that can be problematic, to say the least.
And I suppose Principle 1 just highlights why relationship management is absolutely critical to organisational success, because of this issue that we actually can't be all things to all people. We do need other folk to help us to be able to achieve the organisational objectives that we're striving to achieve. That takes us to... Sorry, you go on.
Yeah, I was just going to make one final point there, that it's a team event. It also infers here high-performance relationships are about teams. And we all have our good examples of high-performance teams, be it, in this case, an orchestra or sports or the like.
Yes. And I suppose that takes us to Principle 2, which is if you are in a team environment, it's about, firstly, relationship approach is firstly a choice and then a responsibility, as you describe. And you've got some illustrations there to sort of explain the differences between different relationships and the responsibilities that come with them.
Indeed, and so with choices and responsibilities also come consequences, of course. So we need to actually understand that if we can't be all things to all people, it infers that there must be choices that we can make legitimately. And so that's where Principle 2 leads into, and those pictures left and right on the principle theme slide, or the principle slide, that talk about the traditional lemon-us negotiations as opposed to the one team, one direction, one set of goals in the partnering and alliancing environment. And that's just two simple examples, I guess, of the choices that we can make. But then there are responsibilities associated with those choices. And in fact, this is a life principle as much as it is obviously a relationship, a business principle. And indeed, what then leads on from there, of course, is the legitimate choices that can be made.
In fact, last week, Tony, I had the opportunity, as you know, to work with you on a relationship improve and review conversation between two organisations, which for confidentiality reasons we need to keep private. But it was very interesting in physically the way that the organisation sat is that they didn't sit on one half of the table like we've got in that illustration on the left. They actually sat mixed around the table. You know, there's person A from organisation A sitting next to person B from organisation B, and then person A from, or person 2 from organisation A, etc. It was a real mix, and they really did take responsibility, even in the way that they sat around that negotiating table, which was just fascinating to see that principle live in action, if you like. Which leads us to, I suppose, really the crux of 0 to 10 relationship management, which for those of you that have never seen this before, it's a very, very powerful matrix, the 0 to 10 relationship management matrix, which is theme 1. And Tony, do you want to, due to time management, we haven't got a lot of time to really go through all the detail in this particular, and we could spend probably 40 minutes just on this itself, but it's an amazing tool. And do you mind just explaining, I suppose, to start with the relationship types and then the relationship performance?
Sure. Look, you're quite right. This is the centerpiece of 0 to 10 relationship management. And really the matrix, the 10 by 10 matrix that you can see there, is a window, a frame or a lens through which we can understand how business relationships work. And on the horizontal scale, there's the relationship types within the vendor, the supplier and the partner segments. And those relationship types range from 0 initially, which is literally 0, not having a relationship engaged, combative, adversarial, aggressive, to protect and defend, tribal, opportunistic, trading, and arm's length transactional, through to a basic do and charge, to a do and improve major outsourcing type of relationship, through to doing and add value long-term key strategic relationships, shared vision, common values, common goals for mutual benefit around partnering and alliancing, of course, and then through to brave, bold and different pioneering relationships, and then lastly, of course, the extended business communities that are forming online and offline. So we've got this relationship type scale, and these are the legitimate choices that were referred to in the previous principle too. And aligning those 5 elements of culture and strategy, structure, process and people is where we are enabling people to move beyond just the original handshake. And one of the critical aspects of this is to have relationships not only survive, but in fact thrive beyond the life of key people. And so this particular matrix is one of the vehicles by which we can do that. And of course, you've got a performance scale on the vertical axis there, which is all about various levels of performance above and below a green line, which is satisfactory 5. And it really talks about measuring financial and non-financial success in those key results areas that are outlined on the top left-hand corner. Customer stakeholder satisfaction, competitive advantage, best practice, innovation attitude being the non-financial aspects. So it becomes a really powerful framework to understand what the current state of your relationships are, what the desired future state may well be over a strategic period typically, which is years not months, and typically 2 to 3, even to 5 years. And of course the journey management aspect that we're talking about is that journey and milestones, the how-to between those 2 anchor points, the current state and the desired future state. The only other aspect to there at this stage it's worth mentioning is probably the secondaries. These secondaries are pockets or outliers for positive influence or for negative influence, in fact, that can impact on the current state and indeed the journey to the desired future state. In fact, secondaries for me are really powerful elements that we need to understand. We need to either remove or deal with the negative secondaries that may be operating, but also embrace the positive secondaries to the right-hand side of the current state, because sometimes they can really be demonstrating the behaviours, the practices, the mindsets that you're in fact seeking to achieve as a desired future state. All up, it's a framework that's proving immensely helpful for organisations in managing their overall business strategy, not just individual relationships as such.
And Tony, the secondary relationships are about a current reality. They're about the current state, aren't they? They're not about the desired future state, because what we're highlighting here with the secondary relationships is that in this example we might have a type 5 type relationship going on here in the current state, but actually we've also got a combative / tribal secondary relationship going on right now within either our business and or the other business. And similarly, we've got a partnering type example also in existence right now, which gives us some opportunity, as you've just mentioned, to be able to leverage off the skills and expertise that have been displayed by those characteristics, given that they're closer to where we actually want to be in the future. So that's just a quick clarification about what these secondary relationships might mean. Tony, you've in the diagram here at the moment, in the matrix, we can see that the relationship is moving from the middle, I suppose, in this case, across to the right. Do the relationships always have to move across to the right-hand side of the matrix?
That's a good question, and the short answer is no. No, they don't. They just need to move to the right place, Gary. That's in essence. Yes. And in fact, it's a really good point that you're making here, or referring to, is that not all relationships need nor should be partnering or alliance or partner segment type relationships. And in fact, ideally for most organisations, it's the spread of relationships in the right places that are the key factor. And in fact, quite often it's about the performance scale as much as it is the relationship type scale. So you'll see that as a sort of a strategic engagement for most organisations, they're interested in overall elevating their performance around their relationships, but understanding the spread of relationships that are required to implement their external strategies.
And you've also got in your book a section which talks about relationship strategy map, where you'd actually plot all your relationships, both in their current state and their desired future state, which would show that spread of relationships that you've explained, including some relationships that you might be choosing to move from, say, a basic supply type relationship to a zero. And at the same time, you'd want it, the way that you went about doing that, you would want to still have a performance level at the satisfactory level or above, in other words, above the green line. So even how we exit exit relationships from this 0 to 10 relationship management matrix is about doing it in a way that's actually right and appropriate for both parties.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, often exits can be an indicator for the incoming organisations as to how well the relationship may proceed into the future. So the zero option is actually really a legitimate relationship option for organisations, and indeed, as you said, current states can move to the left as well as to the right, again depending on the value to be gained. But typically, in most cases, you'll find that the performance levels need to go up, and when you mentioned about the green line, all relationships need to be above this green line. Yes. And whilst the descriptors at the moment on the performance scale are descriptive, but single words or short statement, in fact, they can be linked directly to high-level balanced scorecards and detailed performance scorecards around which KPIs and targets can be associated with,
which we'll be talking about in Theme 2 in just a moment's time. But prior to getting there, we've got a question from Michael where he asks, how are organisations mature in relationship management, continuing to extract value from the relationship? So I'm assuming that means relationships that are well and truly above the green line, in fact probably at levels of outstanding, world-class or superior, and quite possibly more towards the partnering sector as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, the short answer to that is that the good organisations who really are currently quite competent at relationship management are understanding the value of referral of good relationships and the power of reference of good relationships, both for developing other relationships within the portfolio or in the business development area. And also organisations that are competent within this space are now understanding the benefits of high-performance internal relationships between functions and departments and the like. So these organisations are managing relationships now on a far more strategic scale, integrated across the organisation, and also understanding the benefits of internal collaboration and how they can benefit the delivery of external strategy. In fact, it's my experience over the last few years that one of the biggest impediments to the delivery of external strategy is the quality of internal relationships. And examples like Sydney Water is a lead organisation who is evolving partnering within their organisation across operations and maintenance activities and extending that internally throughout functions and departments, and then also externally as well. So good organisations are now taking this not just as an individual relationship management tool, but integrating it right throughout their business strategy.
And Tony, you started talking there about the value proposition of relationship management, and that's principle 3, that customers are the reason suppliers exist. And sometimes folk get stuck on the word customer because they say, well, we're not customers. So if folk are in that place and they say, well, we don't have customers, how would you explain principle 3 to them?
Well, my argument would be if you don't have a customer, you don't have a job. Customers, in that regard, customers literally are the reason everyone exists in some regard. So even if you're a customer, you in turn are a supplier, typically to other organisations downstream in the value chain. So in terms of the 0 to 10 philosophy and approach, it really is customer-centric in that regard, and that applies internal or external. And I'm not in any way devaluing stakeholders and shareholders in their expectations there either. I think the world now is a very complex place, and so understanding the value propositions that link into critically important relationships that are ultimately driven by customer expectations, customer requirements, is really fundamental to doing good business. So for me, in this globalized, very flat sort of world we live in these days, the acknowledgement and recognition of customers as being first amongst equals, for me, is, I guess, fundamentally important.
And I suppose if people can get hung up on the word customers, like, just replace it with whatever relevant word works for them. So if it is other staff, if it's doctors, if it's lawyers, if it's community members, whatever the language you are, we're talking about the principle of having customers here rather than necessarily the label as it fits with principle 3. Would you say, is that reasonable, Tony?
Absolutely right. So if you'd like to call them clients, for example, in terms of suppliers, service providers, those sorts of labels, absolutely appropriate. In fact, the good point you make here is that these principles and themes are meant to be adapted and contextualised according to the environment in which people are working in.
Yes.
So it's very important. Yeah, very important. That's a very important point you make.
Which is why with the theme 2, which we mentioned just before that we'd come to, with 0 to 10 relationship management key components, there's a lot of, this is where we get into the devil of the detail, if you like, and you describe here relationship management agreement and the commercial framework, the relationship charter, which is just some high-level joint key objectives and guiding principles. We've got the governance, and that's a section that might be different for a lot of people, so I might get you to speak to that in just a moment. We've got our scorecards. We've clearly got right centre there, leading from the previous section, our leadership and value proposition. So what's this all about? How are we going to gain share, and what's the pain share? What's the risk reward and based remuneration? And what's the business plan and strategies and action plans that we're actually going to jointly create to be able to get us along that journey? So just because of, again, time, and just briefly the governance section there, Tony, if you wouldn't mind just describing that and why it's even in the key components, please.
Yeah, well, again, it comes back to the matrix where you've got the legitimate relationship approaches. These key components will present differently for each of those relationship approaches, and governance around the stewardship, the leadership, those folks that are in charge or accountable for the well-being of these relationships play a critically important role, and so governance will take on a different perspective depending on the relationship types that are engaged. So governance, when you're in a combative or a tribal type of relationship engagement, or certainly even trading in that vendor space, will typically be one-sided. It'll be led by individuals more than teams. And then as you go towards the partnering space, it's very much around a joint governance approach with leadership teams and management teams who hold themselves directly accountable for the well-being of the relationship overall. And they'll be in charge of the charter, the moral agreements, as well as the relationship business plans and the like, and associated scorecards. So each of these components are critically linked, but it's governance that provides the overall stewardship around which the objectives are delivered and performance is measured.
And that's where, again, it comes back also to understanding that for the type of relationship that we choose to have, that there's responsibilities that come with that relationship, as we've already mentioned. So with Principle 2, so first a choice and then a responsibility. And the governance really puts that into concrete, if you like, doesn't it, Tony?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, my argument would be, with certainly at the high end, approaching that partner segment on the matrix, that without good, clear governance, which infers leadership and a clear understanding of value propositions within the broader business strategy, without that good governance, the relationship is going to be, the relationship improvement process is going to be really quite a challenging one.
And Tony, along the journey we have Principle 4, which is the right people doing the right things in the right way at the right time for the right reasons will deliver the best possible outcomes. And we've got this bus of change with 4 different characters that sit inside that bus of change. Can you give us a very quick and brief overview of these characters and how they affect our ability to create the relationships we desire?
Indeed. Look, it's the rightness principle, Gary, in that regard. You're right people doing the right things, right way, right time, etc. And at the heart of all relationships, but in particular high-performance business relationships, is people. And understanding how those people need to link into good processes, which link into good strategies and structures, is critical. And it's a change process here. Most of the journeys that are undertaken around relationship improvement involve change, and at the heart of change is people. So innovators, the folks at the front of the bus, supported by early adapters, with the vast majority of followers in the middle, and on occasions we have those folks down the back of the bus that aren't particularly aligned, the saboteurs, who overtly or covertly undermine the change process or the journey roadmap. And so understanding those folks is really important, and again comes back to good leadership and stewardship that manages this process.
We've got a question here again, please. If you've got some examples of some key business outcomes you have found due to effective relationship management, so some specific examples of how maybe managing the bus of change and in particular some business outcomes as they relate to effective relationship management. Thank you, Michael, for that question.
Well, I'll give you a very specific example around Sydney Water I alluded to before in terms of their internal pioneering engagement around developing a partnering approach with their operations and maintenance folks, that they were able to demonstrate a step change in their employee engagement, which ultimately then have impacts on productivity and reliability and availability of plant and equipment. So in terms of engaging this bus of change, if you like, and in terms of engaging the journey, people who are more empowered, are engaged on a clear journey around a clear strategy, are more likely to be committed to that approach and then take ownership for their own objectives, but the broader strategy overall. So for me, this whole aspect of people and change is really quite critical around how you manage that whole the whole journey improvement process.
And as you've got here with theme 3, the Let's Go Change model, there are bumps in the road that pop up along the journey, and you've got your clear strategy with the 5 questions that underpin that strategy about enabling us to move from our current state to our future state. And at the end of the day, one of the greatest challenges or I suppose threats with any relationship management journey is Principle 5, which is the paradigm shifts which are required in order to enable us to achieve the success we desire with our relationships. Do you mind just explaining a little bit about this principle and how it relates to paradigm shifts and how that relates to relationship management, please?
Yeah, in terms of, in particular, the partner segment around partnerships, alliances, pioneering and sort of community engagement, it often involves doing something fundamentally different, these breakthroughs that we talk about. And that's often a breakthrough in mindset and attitude as it is in terms of technology or practice. And so, again, it's a life principle, if you like, not just a business principle. Doing the same things and expecting different results it's just rarely going to work for you. So understanding what is a stretch, doing better within your existing environment, and doing something fundamentally different as a breakthrough, that is entering a fundamentally different paradigm, is really important in terms of managing this journey. So there's a development curve coming up which puts that into context in terms of managing the journey from, in some cases, a rescue through to an improvement process and through to a transformational process. So for me, the paradigm shift kicks in oftentimes once you've done the improvement process around the existing paradigms, the way you do business. And when you find all the easy problems have been solved, and you're at that point that you're talking about just there, that on that first plateau of the first phase of improvement, it's there that organisations oftentimes have difficulty understanding where to from here. And quite often it's not about doing the same things better, but it's about doing fundamentally different things and engaging in different ways. And so the concept of partnerships and alliances around shared vision, common goals for mutual benefit, led by fair-minded and reasonable people acting in good faith, for example, is really a paradigm shift for some folks compared to that more traditional adversarial, combative, confrontational approach, which sometimes we're hardwired because of legacy we're often in a place where it becomes business as usual, or the temptation to revert to combative and tribal and trading practices is often overwhelming.
Which is one of the reasons why you got Principle 6, which is relationship management is a process, not an event, and a journey, not a destination. And we've got the 12 steps of that journey. Do you have to start in any particular order with these 12 steps, Tony, or how do we apply these?
No, you can start wherever you want, and you can engage as many steps as is appropriate at any one time. And in fact, it's supported by that principal statement that this whole relationship management space is a process, not an event, and it's a journey, not a destination. So it needs to be seen in that context. And engaging these different steps, and also engaging or understanding the motivators that are at work, is fundamentally important to then driving the ultimate outcomes you're seeking. So for me, there's a lead and a lag, and there's a cause and effect here. And understanding the motivators that are driving the improvement process forward is really quite critical to then engaging the right steps to deliver the ultimate outcomes that you're seeking. So those motivators are everything from adding value to reducing costs through to empowering people and gaining commitment and ownership, which is around that change, managing people and change area.
Yeah.
The various steps then support that process forward, and ultimately you need the metrics around outcomes, financial and non-financial, to measure your progress and measure whether, how the milestones are being achieved and your ultimate goals are being sort of managed towards.
I mean, theme 5 here with the 12 motivators, the 12 steps, and the 6 outcomes that you're trying to achieve is just in one, I suppose, in one illustration showing the depth of the detail. But it also starts with understanding why people want to get into the relationship in the first place, then starting at the appropriate step of the roadmap, and then, well, why would they be doing it? Well, we've got the 6 outcomes that we're striving to achieve on around the outside there. It's just a terrific way of capturing in one illustration just what we're trying to do and why would we even get into relationship management in the first place. We're coming up towards the open mic section, but before we get there, we've got the offline opportunities that people can buy each of the 3 books, and clearly Building High Performance Business Relationships, the new book, is the one that we're focusing on today. And quite clearly, as you can see, the detail that is available within that book behind the interview so far and the content that we've followed with the storyboard today is just absolutely amazing. It really does give you the understanding and the roadmap and the steps to take. There's also opportunities for people to become licensed to Tony's material through becoming an elite trainer facilitator. So those are available through the offline environment. But there's also the online environment, which Tony has been able to launch this year, called the ERAD, and RAD stands for Relationship Alignment Diagnostic. And I'll just briefly show you folks the ERAD website page so that we can get to there. So I'm just opening up that section now. Here we go. Okay, Tony, we should have that up now. And we have the website where folk can go to actually sign up and have ERADs. And there's a little bonus that we're going to be offering folk at the end of this interview for you to be able to access this particular material. But Tony, do you mind just quickly talking about, we've got this two-party ERAD, so E for electronic, relationship alignment diagnostic tool. We've got a sample one here where 4 members of each party have contributed to this particular diagnostic tool, and it gives us, yes, and it gives us some responses down the side. Where we can see that that's it. Happy there?
Yep. Well, yeah, in essence, the ERAD is a map and track strategic business intelligence tool. So in the spirit that it takes 2 to tango here, and at least 1 customer and 1 supplier using those labels in a relationship, what the online diagnostic does is enable individuals and organisations to engage an online process around which they can understand the current state and the desired future state of their most important relationships. And it's proving to be a most valuable strategic business intelligence tool to initiate a conversation as opposed to being a substitute for a conversation. It's a third-party online validation, I guess, of what people are then enabled to have via a subsequent conversation. So it looks at answering questions. It will then, via an algorithm, determine the current state for the relationship, the desired future state from both parties' perspectives, and it will also break that down into, it can break it down into individual respondent components, and people can then use this as a strategic business intelligence tool in understanding where highlights and lowlights for the relationship may sit in terms of practices and behaviours and mindsets.
And one of the benefits too of this particular tool is it enables you to actually see what the variations of people's responses would look like. So, for example, if we were to deselect a couple of one of each of the members from each of the parties, from Party A and Party B in this example, and if we were then to scroll down in a moment to the outcome, we can actually see the change in the results down in the sections down the bottom here.
Absolutely. So it becomes a very powerful tool if you're talking about a very complex relationship across states, across countries, across divisions, across products and services, where there may be a lot of people involved, a lot of different aspects of the relationship involved. You can understand where the highlights are, the hotspots, where the lowlights are, maybe the rub points or friction points, and you can select and deselect aspects according to either individuals or functions or other aspects, products or services, and really break down and understand where the relationship is, where the opportunities for improvement are, and where some other opportunities for eliminating some rub points may be as well. So it becomes a very powerful business intelligence tool.
And, you know, so my experience of seeing it used live, it's just unbelievably valuable, again, to have folk the opportunity to do the ERAD prior to coming along to a workshop or a program, and then actually talking through the possible results, and then actually seeing the results live is just unbelievably powerful from my experience. So I encourage folk to consider going through that approach.
Yeah, there's a really strong validation between the ERAD results and the subsequent conversations that are had in a workshop environment, and then more importantly then around the roadmap that is then built to deliver improvements between the current state and the desired future state.
I'd like to take this opportunity to just open up the mics if anyone does have a specific question to ask Tony. If you wouldn't mind raising your hand, and we can open up your mic and let you ask a question of Tony specifically. I'll just give you another 15 seconds or so to check through your notes and see if you've got any specific questions you'd like to ask Tony. And then we'll get on to providing you with some bonus opportunities that are just terrific that Tony's been quite happy to be able to provide us. At this stage, it's not looking like we've got any. Yes, we do have a question. So, Ralph, thank you for raising your hand. What question would you like to ask Tony?
Tony, hi. You mentioned earlier that these tools and models are applicable in personal life as they are in business. So I was wondering if you wanted to elaborate a bit on that. Tell us how they apply personally, as opposed to in the business sphere.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question actually. Look, the immediate example that comes to mind is house renovation, Ralph. In fact, probably the biggest investment I think folks make outside of the original purpose outside the original purchase of a house or a property is, of course, the subsequent renovation. And if we think about the typical process there, it quite often involves best of three quotes and selecting the cheapest price. And of course, sometimes that can be a very difficult journey. And can go in the wrong direction. So you could take a very collaborative approach, which I've done on occasions, and produce very different results in terms of being open and transparent around both the commercial aspects as well as the non-commercial aspects. But we have also community relationships in our personal lives, everything from our sporting teams to community groups that we link into, and in fact often that presents as our purpose to life. In fact, we have often friendships that take us out of our comfort zone and enable us to break or engage a pioneering spirit, if you like, anything from climbing mountains to the like. And we have best friendships, which are often around good partnerships, lifelong partnerships, in fact, as well as the obvious example of marriages. And I dare say, look, even in our personal lives, we engage lawyers to solve disputes in everything from neighbours to other aspects. So, and we go and trade. We go to markets. We buy cars. We love to do deals as human beings. So there's more than enough opportunities to trade. And last but not least, I can think of the trades themselves: plumbers, electricians, and other folks of that like, who very much do and charge around a sort of a basic activity, of basic products and services. So our life is full of relationships. So the analogy for me between business and our private lives is quite direct.
And for me, I'd add in that it often generates Principle 5, which is really about that paradigm shifting, and even to see how this whole framework can relate to personal relationships, Ralph, really incurs Principle 5. That's a paradigm shift in and of itself to be able to look at them in that way. And I know personally, since I came across this material, it's been very helpful in that space.
Yep. Yeah. In fact, Principle 5 is something very similar to what Albert Einstein had once quoted, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Indeed it is. Yeah. Yeah. Right. In fact, for all these principles, I take no credit for the actual statements themselves. There's either statements of others or statements I've heard over the years.
Right.
It's the context within which it's used that I guess I'm looking at in terms of 0 to 10 relationship management. And in fact, you're absolutely right around the insanity principle. Probably no better person to go to than Albert Einstein to clarify that for sure.
Right. All right. Okay. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Gary.
No worries. Thanks, Ralph. Okay, folks, this takes us to where Tony has kindly offered 2 offers for folks that are listening in live and also those that might be viewing the recording of this prior to October the 31st, 2011. You can actually buy his new book, Building High Performance Business Relationships, for Australian $47. Its recommended retail price is currently $59.95, so that's a terrific virtually $13 saving there. And you can also complete a complimentary ERAD and receive a second complimentary ERAD from Tony. So you saw the ERAD just before. You can apply that to an existing relationship where everyone gets an opportunity for a free one. But Tony's also going to give folk who take up this opportunity prior to October 31st, 2011 to get a second complimentary ERAD, which is just a terrific opportunity. All you have to do is email Tony at partner@aussiemail.com.au. Again, email Tony at partner@aussiemail.com.au and inform him that you would like to take up both of those opportunities. So it's just a terrific offer, and on behalf of all the folk online and those people that will be seeing the recording of this, Tony, I'd just like to publicly thank you for such a generous offer. Folks,
my pleasure.
Folks, that takes us to the end of our interview, and I'd like to thank Tony again for his wonderful opportunity to really give us a lot of detail in the way that he's explained about building high-performance business relationships and, in particular, 0 to 10 relationship management. I really thank you for your time, Tony, and coming to speak with us as part of our Leadership Insight series. For those of you that are interested, Organisations That Matter has what we call the OTM Academy. It's free to join at www.otmacademy.com. Tony's in fact a member of the OTM Academy, so you can contact Tony through that environment as well over time. Membership's free. There's opportunity to get direct access to these types of webinars. There's lots of ebooks, lots of other material in there to help you to create an organisation that matters. You've got my contact details there where you can contact the office. If you're calling from outside Australia, please add your international code plus the numbers +61 in order to access either the business or the mobile, and you've got all of the contact details there. Thanks again for joining us all. Thanks again, Tony. I appreciate you all coming on board, and again, the recording will be sent to you all. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to working with you next time.